Welcome back to Read Poems Every Day. We're just a few days into summer, so now seems a good time to return to Audrey and Rich's 621, a poem about the summer solstice. Well, sort of about the summer solstice. In a past video, I already worked through the first three steps of my process of slowly getting to know a poem. I read it out loud, which I may do again in this video. I counted some beans. I listened for sound and sense, but now it's time to describe form and figures, if I can find any, or if I have anything to say about these aspects of the poem. Let's reread the poem quickly. Well, not so much quickly, but let's just cut to the chase and read the poem, and then we can think about the relevance of form and if we see any figures of speech or figurative language at play in the poem. 621, here it is. It's June in summer's height. The longest bridge of light leaps from all the rivets of the sky. Yet it's of earth and nowhere else I have to speak. Only on earth has this light taken on these swiveled meanings. Only on this earth where we are dying, befouled, gritting our teeth, losing our guiding stars, has this light found an alphabet, a mouth. Okay, form. I do have a separate video where I go over what I mean by form or poetic form. So here all I'll say is that for form can mean, for me, the adoption of a certain kind of literary subgenre, like a sonnet or a villanelle. That isn't really at play here. More generally, I think of form as shape and arrangement, but also as the relationship between the different parts of the poem. How does a line late in the poem, for instance, affect a line um, early in the poem? How does a turn that happens midway through the line affect other parts of the poem? How does a certain register or category of diction or word choice sort of set the tone of the poem, the vibe of the poem? Does it wrestle with other categories of language or other registers of language in the poem? So that's a bit of a more elaborate definition that I intended to go over here, but I hope it makes sense. So can we think about form with respect to Rich's poem? Let's see here. So we might think about words that bring a potential kind of connotation or a potential kind of category of language with them. So we might think of, let's say, significant words like bridge, like rivet, like swivel, befoul, grit, guide, alphabet, mouth. Now, this isn't to say that all these words share something with each other, but that they seem to be very carefully selected words that might have connotations, creating some kind of subterranean significance. It makes it sound like there's something if we just chip away at it, we'll just find the inner, hidden, deeper secret meaning of the poem. That's not quite what I mean. Think of this more like like a kind of network of vibes, right? That these words might bring different vibes with them. Hmm. I could probably add also leap to this. I mean, it's a surprisingly active poem, light, leaping, right? But we also, we don't tend to think of bridges leaping. Rather, we leap from bridges. Not a pleasant thought. So that's one thing that sort of comes up as something that's complicated or a question I might have about those particular words. There is the connection too between speak in line, let me see, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the poet or the speaker directly addresses their own activity of speaking. And then the final line of the poem, which is that line 12, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? The mouth of line 12. And this sort of parallels a kind of sense of of the personal, or let's say the first person um, self reference to third person discovery of the light, which also maps onto a kind of lost, lost losing, or the activity of lost losing and found finding. So we have a dynamic of people losing stars and light finding a mouth. And so we have sort of a two directional observation happening here. And it's not entirely clear at the moment exactly how we're supposed to think about that. Bridge, leap, rivet, swivel. What is a rivet? Hold on as I just check my handy pocket dictionary. Leaps from all the rivets of the sky. Well, I guess that would be a bridge like. Would that be like a bridge like thing? Hmm. Bridge like thing. So we have maybe a kind of turn of phrase here, where the longest bridge of light sort of leaps from all the rivets of the sky. And so it's in some sense it's the sky then that's a kind of structure, right? Or a structure of sort that the light is kind of jumping off of or jumping from. And so the height of summer, which is a way of talking about the longest day of summer, transforms into a kind of uh, actual height of the sky, the sun, the heavens, right? From which light leaps, right? So it becomes a distance that, where light sort of drops down, as opposed to a way to think about the length of the day. Of course, the length of the day is also then associated. This way of speaking reminds us with the height of the sun. So the sun is up there. Of course, it's up there. You know what I mean. Hmm. These associations I was just piecing together just a few minutes ago between speech and mouth, between first person self reference and third person discovery of the light, between people losing stars and light finding an alphabet or a mouth, is also part of a contrast or a binary the poem is exploring between earth and sky, stars. I sort of inserted heaven or the heavens as a way of talking about that too, which the poem does not do. And so the light then is also contrasted with what it is about life on earth that can sometimes be so difficult. Of course, death, finitude, um, the material realities of existence, which are hard, often hard. So gritting our teeth, and then losing our guiding stars. Hmm, that is interesting. So there's also then the contrast between stars and sun, so to speak, because summer's height, of course, is usually with reference to the sun. And then the sense of a sort of longest day, sort of minimizing our access to the stars, slips into then becoming a way of thinking about how in modern life, if that's what I can say about this poem, there's a sense of having lost, um, whether through spiritual, either for spiritual or religious reasons, or maybe for political or national reasons, a sense of direction of where we're going, right? Um, and so that sense of the longest day contrasts or is in a kind of tension with that sense of lostness, right? That despite the long day, despite um, the solstice, there's still a sense of the befouled, dying befouled, gritting our teeth, losing our guiding stars. Hmm. This might be a question for the next section. Is there hope here in the link, in the activity of language and its efforts to address or maybe use the light? I don't know. I don't know. It's something I have to think through. I have to think about it a bit more. Okay. So I hope it makes sense how studying the form of the poem, the kinds of words it uses, and the relationship between the different parts of the poem and what it describes, ideas start to kind of percolate and crop up as we do that. Okay, so figures of speech then. Um, so maybe that's just form. Is there figurative language here? There isn't really, there's not like, I guess there's some sort of personification, kind of, but not really. Maybe. Is light personified? It leaps, it finds, right? Takes on meaning. So I'm not sure if that's personification or not. It kind of is, maybe. But it's, so maybe that's one area the poem is exploring in terms of figures of speech. Let's look back at the poem. It's June in summer's height. The longest bridge of light leaps from all the rivets of the sky. So I guess that's the metaphorical way. Lines 2 through 4 figure the longest day of the year as a light leaping, bridging, a drop from sky rivets for whatever that's worth. So the sky is figured as a bridge or construction of some kind. Since rivets, according to my quick googling, ornament consisting of a circular rounded protuberance. I'm not sure that's quite what it's referring to. The studs, maybe the studs. Is that a way to think about the stars then? Hmm. I don't know. I don't know. It's also thought of as a heavy pin having a head at one end and the other being hammered flat. after being passed through holes in the pieces that are fastened together. Hmm. As a verb, it's also, of course, the directing of attention. So maybe I'm off base here in thinking about that. Anyway, at least I posed the problem here. What kind of figure are we dealing with when we invent the phrase "rivets of the sky"? Hmm. Rivets of the sky. And then yeah, I guess I don't see any um clear, say, metaphors, metonymies. Maybe there's some metonymization in the final line, a sort of double metonymization, where alphabet and mouth are standing in for something. Because of course, what the final line is kind of saying is that the light finds us, or finds creatures who have mouths that speak or communicate, and that they do so often through a language represented by, or sort of learned by way of learning an alphabet, right? Whatever an alphabet is. So there might be something going on there. Metonymy is a figure of speech where you refer to something by something that's associated with it. The most common kinds of metonymies are sometimes called synecdoches, where you refer to the part of something as standing in for the whole, right? So if I say, "Can you give me a hand?" Right? I don't literally mean "give me your hand." I also might not even mean "can I make use of your hands?" Right? To help me do something, but I might mean that. And so in that sense, I'm asking for help, right? Can you, the all of you, come help me? Can I get a hand? Or maybe two. And that's sort of a instance of metonymy in a way. Everyday kind of metonymization. Um, mis, mis, mistyped that. What are alphabet and mouth? Or wait, just are alphabet and mouth standing in for something? Okay, so that I think that's it there. Hmm. I think that might be all we need to do. There is, of course, a kind of, I mean, there is a kind of, I've been wondering what to say about this aside here with the triple verb phrase, dying, befouled, gritting our teeth, losing our guiding stars, because it's not quite right to say that's an instance of amplification, but it is the three verb phrases about life on Earth, a kind of lyric. It is a kind of lyric amplification, right? The triplicate um, verb, triplicate ing verbs, sort of harsh negativity of the description contrasts so powerfully with the emphasis on light. And so the point here is that there's a side effect that's being aimed for here. So that what I'm not necessarily saying those two lines are an example or figurative language because they don't have, say, literal meanings to them, but that their use and their arrangement um, is attempting to produce effects that exceed just their literal meaning. Um, and what the best way to describe that might be a kind of amplification, lyric amplification, not quite hyperbole or exaggeration, although maybe that too. All right, I think I'm going to stop there. We're just past the past the 20-minute mark, just talking about form and figures in a 12-line poem. So we're going to stop there. Maybe tomorrow we'll wrap up with ideas and questions, contexts, and an anticipation of what might happen if I return to this poem next summer solstice. What might be on my mind then? Thanks for joining me reading this poem again. Let's read some poems tomorrow.